Stan Lee is perhaps best known for taking Marvel Comics and turning it into a huge multi-industry powerhouse. And if not for that, then definitely for being that old man who shows up in Marvel movies and makes all of the nerds in the audience clap their hands with glee as though they're in on some sort of inside joke.
Oh, hello Rebecca. I was just settling down for a nice cup of coffee even though it's nearly 10 o'clock over here. What have you got to say today? I'm sure it can't be possibly something to do with Stan Lee being a racist.
Recently, Stan Lee told reporters that he agrees with a leaked Sony Pictures email that stated that Spider-Man should always be white.
Okay, now, I know what you're trying to say here. You're trying to twist the leaked report into saying something that it didn't actually say. Now, I've got the email up right here with the relevant parts. So let's read them, Rebecca. Let's read them in context. And we'll start off with A. Mandatory Spider-Man character traits. Spider-Man, whether Peter Parker or an alternative Spider-Man character, must always strictly conform to the following mandatory character traits. Male, does not torture, does not kill unless in defence of self or others, does not use foul language beyond PG-13, does not smoke tobacco, does not sell, distribute illegal drugs, does not abuse alcohol, does not have sex before the age of 16, does not have sex with anyone below the age of 16, not a homosexual unless Marvel has portrayed that alter ego as a homosexual. So as we can see here, that unless Marvel has portrayed him otherwise, Sony will not portray him as the opposite. Now he can be gay, but only if there is an alter ego in which Spider-Man is gay. So they're not saying that he can't be gay, it's just that the character that isn't gay can't be gay. That's pretty straightforward. They're basically trying to keep it as close to the comics as possible. You know, what's the point in having a gay Spider-Man when he's in love with Mary Jane or Gwen Stacy? Doesn't make a lot of sense, unless he was bi. Which, for all we know, there could well be a bi Spider-Man in the future, but chances are it's not going to be Spider-Man. I mean, Peter Parker. And now here's the one that Rebecca Watson wants us all to think is just Spider-Man. Like, he can't be black, he can't be Latino, he can't be Asian, he can't be anything other than white. And this is B. Peter Parker character traits. No, Peter Parker and not alternate Spider-Man character. So, if this was Miles Morales, it would be a completely different list, but kind of similar. You just replace certain words. So, let's read it. B. Peter Parker character traits. Depiction of Peter Parker or his Spider-Man alter ego must conform to the following character traits. His full name is Peter Benjamin Parker, as it is in the comics. He is Caucasian, heterosexual, like it was in the comics. His parents become absent from his life during his childhood. In the comics. From the time his parents become absent, he is raised by Aunt May and Uncle Ben in New York City. In the comics, he gains his powers while attending either middle school or college. In the comics, he designs his first red and blue costume, and he gains his powers from being bitten by a spider, both of them in the comics, although I read them in the wrong order. But it doesn't matter, this could be in any order, it doesn't matter. The black costume is a symbiote, and is not designed by him. In the comics, he is raised in a middle-class household in Queens, New York. I guess? I don't know. I don't know how class works in America, but if he's middle class, he's middle class. Okay, that's neither here nor there. He attends or attended high school in Queens, New York, and he attends or attended college in New York City, New York. In the comics. Okay. So Rebecca, what you're trying to say is that basically Stan Lee agrees with Sony that Peter Parker should be as he is in the comics. They shouldn't change it. And if they want Spider-Man to be whatever they want Spider-Man to be, it should be a completely different character, like Miles Morales. If this was to do with Miles, it would say his full name is Miles something 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 Morales. I don't know his middle name or names. He is black / Latino, as in mixed, you know. and is heterosexual. I think he is. Is he? People, I haven't read Ultimate Spider-Man yet, so you tell me if he's gay, bi, or straight, or anything in between. I don't know. I'm assuming he is. And anything else, you know, like his suit would be, his suit is blue and red, but in a different kind of pattern. And he's a lot younger. I think he's a high school kid, isn't he? I think he's like 14. So him having sex, so everything else applies to him, that you changed words. But she's trying to say here, or rather, she's implying that Stan Lee is a racist and says that Spider-Man should be white, always white. When he didn't say that, he said that Peter Parker should be what he is represented in the comics. But let's see what she has to say.
He said, "We originally made him that way, and I don't see any reason to change that." He said he doesn't see the point of changing an established character when you could just make up a new one. He said exactly, "I say create new characters the way you want to. Hell, I'll do it myself." I, for one, would absolutely love to see Stan Lee try to create a character by himself. It would be a first.
Wow. So, apparently Stan Lee, being more of a co-creator than a solo creator, somehow makes him less of a talent. Sorry, Rebecca, but he's a writer. He's not an artist. He writes what the character is, and the stories, etc., etc., and through that, the artists create the image of Spider-Man. Remember, it's Stan Lee that will come up with a concept, or maybe an artist will come up with a concept, and the two will, or three or four. Remember, it's not just all Jack Kirby that did everything, as some people think, and just like how it's not Stan Lee who did everything. It was a collaborative effort. So what if he's a collaborator? What's that got to do with anything? What about all the great musicians that have been writing teams? Lennon and McCartney, Jagger and Richards, Ulrich and Hetfield, etc. All these different writing groups who have formed the backbone of either a smaller team or a bigger team. Because remember, not all the bands that I listed had group collaborations. Some of them were the sole creators. So you can't belittle him for that. And you know what? If I've tried, even if he doesn't solo create himself, doesn't detract the slightest from what he did. He still created all these characters. He still created the storylines and everything. So I'd like to see what you've done as a social justice warrior feminist, Rebecca Watson. It'd be a first if you even created anything that wasn't internet drama. I'm nearly out of coffee.
Lee says that making Spider-Man black, which by the way he is now in the comics.
That's in the Ultimate Universe, Rebecca, not the Amazing Spider-Man comics, in which it's still Peter Parker. Get it right. Get your facts right before you start trying to criticise someone, okay?
Would be akin to making the Black Panther character Swiss, which is weird because I don't know if he knows this, but there are black people in Switzerland.
That's not what he's saying, Rebecca. Stop trying to twist his words and trying to fool your subscriber base into thinking that Stan Lee is stupid or in some way racist. What he's saying is turning Peter Parker black, not Spider-Man. Because remember, Spider-Man is the alter ego. Spider-Man is not a separate person. Remember, Peter Parker is Spider-Man and Spider-Man is Peter Parker, just like Miles Morales is Spider-Man and Spider-Man is Miles Morales. And Black Panther is... I forgot Black Panther's name, actually, but you get the gist. It is literally the same thing. It is as bad as each other. No one would ever try and turn Black Panther white. And yes, he used the word Swiss, but it was, yes, there are some black people in Switzerland, but by and large, the majority of the population are white Europeans. That's what he was referring to. He should have said white. He could have chosen his words a bit better, but, oh, come on, the guy's 92. Still got his marbles. Can you at least give him some leeway? You know exactly what he was trying to say. Don't twist it and try to be pedantic in that autistic way. That's my job.
Although he's right that it would be weird maybe for a Swiss person to adopt the character name Black Panther because they probably wouldn't know much about the Black Panther movement.
You're implying that because they're Swiss, that they wouldn't know what the Black Panther movement is. I'm sorry, but Black Panther is called Black Panther because he was born and raised in Africa, where panthers come from, and that's why he called himself the Black Panther. Also, he wears black. I mean, the creators were probably inspired by the Black Panther movement, but by and large it's more of an African thing than it is necessarily an American thing. That's just my take on it. A Swiss person would know who the Black Panthers are. Everyone knows, or at least most people would know, the fight for civil rights, especially if they're of a history-minded type of person, such as myself. I mean, everyone knows who MLK is. So by that logic, most people will know who were the belligerents in the civil rights movement. Most people would know that. The Black Panthers are worldwide known. Rebecca.
Although, if you were to relate that to Spider-Man in this instance, then what Stan Lee is saying is that he doesn't think that black people in New York City would really have any understanding of what a spider is.
No, that's not what he's saying.
If, on the other hand, he actually meant that it would be like making Black Panther white,
which he was, and you know this,
then black is in Black Panther's name. That's how essential it is to his character. And we're not talking about a comic book character called Whiter Man, so it doesn't really apply here.
Yes, it does. It still matters. Just because Spider-Man, when he's Peter Parker, is white, doesn't mean that changing his ethnicity is any worse, is not as bad as changing Black Panthers. People are trying to change, well, at least this was a while back, trying to change Iron Fist's, even though his race is actually important to the story, because he's a white guy who goes over to Asia, doesn't know a thing, and then grows to know certain things. And plus his mate is, I forgot, is it Johnny Cage? Not Johnny Cage, no, I forgot his name, but, 70s kung fu thing, a white guy and a black guy fighting crime and kicking ass, kung fu, martial arts style. Anyway, that's essential to his character, yet they wanted to change him, that character, the person who's playing Iron Fist, into an Asian man, but then it wouldn't have the same impact, would it? Unless you could work some kind of magic, but, why change something that isn't broken? What Stan Lee is saying is, people like you who want to change Peter Parker's race to fit your agenda, like they changed Thor, even though technically Thor the god is still around, but that is Thor. That is not some person who picked up the hammer. This is actually a female Thor. And look what's happened when you guys do that. This is the main Thor. This isn't a spin-off Thor a la Miles Morales as Spider-Man, which is in a different universe. This is Thor, and it's crap. This is what happens when you guys do that to push an agenda. That's what he's saying. He's saying that you cannot change Peter Parker just because. Just because diversity. That doesn't mean that the quality of the work is going to be good. If anything, it's just agenda pushing, and that people will just see the colour. It's what's happened with Fantastic Four recently. But I wonder, will you be mentioning that?
Being white isn't an essential part of Spider-Man's character, as we know from the notes and actual words of the creators of Spider-Man, who were, if you're wondering, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and a bit of dialogue thrown in by Stan Lee.
Actually, Jack Kirby didn't create Spider-Man, it was Stephen Ditko and Stan Lee together. Stop! You see, this is less of an argument for diversity in comics and more about a hit piece on Stan Lee himself. You seem to be doing nothing but belittling Spider-Man, and in further things, you're also kind of being racist to yourself in saying that white people's problems, blah 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 blah, aren't worse, or just because it's white doesn't mean it's bad. Look, changing any character's race for an agenda is bad. That's what he's saying. And by the way, if you can totally create a story where Spider-Man's race is important. I'm sure there has been many stories in Spider-Man's history where his race is important to the story. You can totally create one if you want, where being white can be a factor in the story. And plus, we're arguing about fictitious characters.
None of which I don't think was, boy, I'm super white. Here are a few of the characteristics that were essential to Spider-Man, at least according to the creators when they were building him. Number one, that he was a teenager. Teenagers becoming superheroes is a classic now. Wish fulfillment. Number two, that he is a science nerd. Again, more wish fulfillment.
In fact, it said nothing about him being a science nerd. It just said that he went to college. But by definition, that means he has to go study science, because that's what he did. I think he studied physics or biology, or both. I can't quite recall what he studied, but all we know is that he's a scientific guy and that's what he studied. But stop trying to lie or try to twist in what he's saying. It's clear that you've not got the full email, otherwise you would not have said what I just said, apart from the first one, which is kind of true, I guess.
He's the geeky loser who suddenly has the ability to best every jock in the school. And number three, that he gains the powers of a spider. Super strength, great agility, balance. And you may be thinking, well, what about the ability to shoot webbing out of his ass like a spider would? Well, he didn't have those originally. As he was designed, Steve Ditko designed him some really awesome artificial web slingers that he wore on his wrists. Peter Parker made those himself using the aforementioned science nerdery. He later mutated the ability to actually shoot webs out of his wrists, not his butt, unfortunately.
Rebecca Watson, the comedian, ladies and gentlemen.
But according to Stan Lee, that means he should have always just had artificial web slingers. He should never have mutated, because that was an important part of his character as he was made.
Now, I don't know when he developed or mutated actual natural web. I don't know if that's a thing in the comics. The comics that I read, you know, I think it was I don't think it was Ultimate Spider-Man. It may have been Ultimate before it became Morales. I can never remember. I never read The Amazing Spider-Man. But he always had web shooters. And now that was only 10 years ago. So unless this is a very recent thing, because I've not read many comics about Spider-Man for a while now. So excuse my ignorance on that part. But Stan Lee doesn't write Spider-Man anymore. He hasn't since the 70s, or at least the late 60s, when he moved to more of a kind of admin-y, kind of overseer, script editor kind of thing. I know that he talks about this himself, like, people, as soon as he left, they killed off Gwen Stacy. He didn't mind that, in fact. He said that they can do whatever they want with the character. At least Peter Parker, you know. Within reason. And so, I mean, he would obviously object to changing Spider-Man's race because of agenda reasons, you know, like what you're suggesting, which is as bad as changing Black Panther to a white person because of diversity. That's exactly what you guys would do if you could get away with it. He's not arguing that everything should remain exactly the same for 50 years. He says, mate, do whatever you want, just don't change it because diversity, because politics, because you want to. You've got to do it in the hopes that it's a good story. And if not, just create your own character. You could totally create a Peter Parker that shoots web out of his bum, if you want to. I mean, you would love that. You seem to really like that.
But that's not how comics work.
That's not how comics work according to Rebecca Watson. That is your opinion, not the rest of society's. Not the rest of the fandoms. Okay? Let's make that distinction, Rebecca.
Comics go on for a very long time, and as such, they pretty much have to change in interesting ways to keep us reading them.
Yes, characters can evolve and change certain things about them. Their personality changes. That is, of course, inevitable. I mean, Peter Parker has grown up from the 1960s. He's no longer the teenager that is portrayed in the movies, which I think is what a lot of people didn't like. They wanted an older Spider-Man. They wanted someone who isn't in college. They wanted someone who's in the current Peter Parker, who's late 20s, early 30s, I think. In the last 50 years, he's grown up only about 10 to 20 years. So but they want the experienced, skillful, in theory, complete Spider-Man in the comics. They don't want the high school brat, or nerdy brat, that we all know and have seen from Sam Raimi up until recently. You know, that's been done. We've done that. Can we have an older Spider-Man, or maybe Morales? But personally, I think if they're going to do Morales, it has to be kind of a split universe. We can't just have him there because diversity, because this is what we want. We're going to campaign because we're sick of Spider-Man who's white all the time. You know, characters can change, but they can't change because you want them to change, because you're not happy that Peter Parker's white. Well, I'm sorry, but he is white. And whether you like it or not, it kind of is essential to his character, to Peter Parker, just as Black Panther being black is essential. You know, I mean, whether you like it or not, Peter Parker will always be what he is. And I'm a mixed race guy, and I don't care. Peter Parker, for me, was an icon because he was more of the nerdy, bratty type that beat up those jocks and then went on to beat up all the evil people. That's why I liked him. Plus, he was a badass. You know, he was someone who I could relate to on a personal level, not a racial level. I never saw him as anything like that. I saw him as someone who was a superhero who beat up the people I didn't like. Okay? Who I wanted to be. He's still my favourite hero, hands down. You know, more so than Batman. More so than Superman. More so than anyone. I grew up reading his comics. I have more Spider-Man comics than I do anything. And it wasn't the race that was important. In fact, it was... only people like you would bring it up. Because diversity. Because agenda. In fact, it's got nothing to do with diversity. It's just got to do with you, what you personally don't like, and how your feels are, you know? Stop trying to change things that don't need to be changed. Like, that's what Stan Lee's saying. Create your own characters. It doesn't matter if it's shit or good, just do it. To quote Shia LaBeouf, just do it!
And so Spider-Man changes. He mutated that ability. He later lost that ability. He regained a dead aunt. That's the way comics work.
According to Rebecca Watson.
So while Lee may have a great point that it would be awesome to see brand new characters who are more than just straight white men getting bit by things, he has to admit that he is a central part of an industry that's dragging around 40-year-old characters and introducing them into new media and then rebooting them over and over and over again.
And just like you are part of a 40-year-old business that keeps repeating the same old tired and long debunked theories and arguments again and again and again and repackaging them. But that's okay, because it's the Stan Lees, the Steve Ditkos and Jack Kirbys who are at fault here. The ones who are actually out there creating content for future generations to love that will last yet another 40 years. No, instead, you are arguing that we want the same old straight white guys, but we're going to change them so that they're the same characters. We're going to repackage them as different ethnicities, different sexualities, and rinse and repeat for the next 40 years. How is that as good as, or even better, than just having the same old heroes with the same old alter egos and etc, etc? I'm sorry, but that's worse. They're still the same characters no matter what skin colour you draw them as, or whoever you draw them kissing or whatever. What you're saying is no different.
Instead of retiring them and actually letting new characters thrive.
Retire Spider-Man and Superman and the Green Lantern and the Fantastic Four when people have grown up for the past 40 years watching them. Just like how, for example, other TV series like, I don't know, for British example, Coronation Street. You know, that soap has been going on for 50 years. Longer than any other television soap. So what you're saying is, despite the fact that we could create the next big thing alongside those heroes, no, we should just stop making stories about these heroes and get something new in, because apparently that'll stop those heroes from growing and becoming financial successes. I'm sorry, but when it's not Final Fantasy, when the Fantastic Four first hit, do you think they just automatically just stopped creating the other heroes they'd made before Fantastic Four? No, they didn't. Maybe a few had ended, but others before the Fantastic Four are still around. Don't forget, Spider-Man came after the Fantastic Four, and Fantastic Four was the huge, first massive hit that I think Stan Lee and Kirby and Ditko had, you know? Yet Fantastic Four are still here. There's a movie coming out in the near future. That shows you can create new content that will be as big as them and can coexist. There's no reason to destroy something and rebuild out of the ashes. What are you talking about? This is just an excuse for people like you to not create new stuff. You know, oh, this is your excuse for not bothering, I should say. Oh, these long, well-established heroes are stopping us from creating something because they get all the profits. They get profits because people like them, because they have assured quality. If you can get a hero that is as good as them and build it up over the years, because remember, Spider-Man did not become the success it was straight away. It had to, you know, longevity is built through quality and constant writing and trying to perfect the formula, you know? That's why he is successful as a character. There's no reason you can't do that with others. There's no reason to use them as an excuse for not writing it. For not writing the next gay or black or Hispanic or Asian or mixed race character. That's bullshit, Rebecca.
So with that in mind, maybe he should take a look at his own comics for inspiration and give us Miles Morales in a Spider-Man film.
No. Are you seriously trying to lecture one of the biggest and most successful, most creative minds in comic books on how to create heroes or how to advise Marvel, the film production company, how to make their movies, or Sony how to make their movies? He's not the one who does everything. He's not this omnipotent god over Marvel in that sense. He's merely more of a spokesperson now. He doesn't really do much outside of his own little projects or the odd cameo in the movie, you know? No, why don't you take a lesson from what Stan did back when he was barely 16 years old, thereabouts, when he first joined Marvel. Make your own content. Make it good. Make it easy for people to read. Whether that be through distribution or just your style, you know. You don't have to make it easy. You can make it the most complicated stuff in the world, but as long as it's good. You keep at it. You keep making it, you keep going, you make sure that you build up a fan base, and then one day you might get the next Spider-Man or the next Fantastic Four or Batman, and then you just sit back, relax, but while keeping the quality good. You know, you've got to make sure that the stories are good, that the art is good, and then you can sit back and watch the next 40 years roll by as you reap the rewards of a new superhero who stands side by side of either Spider-Man and Batman as a classic. And trust me, there will be superheroes that will be that have been created now, but we don't know who they will be. So you take a lesson out of his book, not the other way around. I think I'd rather trust Stan Lee's word than yours. You know, at least he's an honest person and doesn't lie about coffee and elevators.
So we can finally have the Spider-Man we've always wanted.
No. The Spider-Man that you want to drive your agenda for whatever it is. Whether that be for social justice or feminism or diversity, whatever you want to sugarcoat it. No, diversity is not what you want. You just want to control the way that people create art and how they write and how they think. That's what you want. That's your agenda. That's what you want. That's not what the rest of the world wants. It's not what the market wants. You know, I may have my reservations about the market, but at least I agree with the fact that the market always decides. And the market doesn't want Miles Morales in a movie. Or at least Peter Parker to be what Miles Morales is. That's not what they want. I'm sorry. But at the same time, I wonder, is that what you want? You couldn't care whether or not Peter Parker was white or black. Just as long as you can get your agenda in there somewhere. That's all that you care about.
played by Donald Glover, shooting webs out his butt.
Social justice warrior art, ladies and gentlemen. Social justice art. And that's all from me today. This has been Charming Man 93. Like and share the video. Drop a comment. Subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you later, true believers. Excelsior!